All right, aviators, we are here with Bud, and joining us today is Patrick. Patrick is a newly winged pilot. He just started at the airlines, and we're going to learn a little bit about his story, getting up to the airlines, and what that life is like now. Patrick, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Pleasure.
Yeah, man, really cool. I get a chance to work with Patrick again. Patrick was my CFI. So
Okay.
he taught me to fly. He endorsed my solo. He was there when I made that nice ground landing. Didn't set off the ELT, just pointing things out. And we didn't have to tell the owner nothing. It wasn't that bad. But boy, I come in hard right there. And it's good to have a CFI that helps you and helps you through the process. Sometimes he's got to let you get. You gotta know. You gotta know what's going to happen. We didn't hurt anything, but it was a good learning experience. He's a great teacher. Great teacher.
Well, no doubt we believe Patrick's a good teacher, but let's learn a little bit about what made him that great teacher. Patrick, what got you into aviation, and where'd you grow up? Where were you from?
So I did all of my aviation training in Vermont, which was a little bit of a different weather climate than Arizona. So I had negative 20 days and negative 25 days, but for the most part, all of my training happened in Vermont. I went down to Florida for multi-engine training. Mm-hmm. And that was a different experience, getting to sweat through my shirt in the plane. But
It prepared you for Arizona.
Oh my word, yeah. It really did. So I started with Vermont Flight Academy in Vermont, and went all the way up through private, instrument, commercial, CFI, all of it out of one airport. I had, for the most part, seen my backyard. I had seen the little airports, rinky-dink airports, all of which had 1 and 1.9. All of them. And so you would hear 1 and 1.9 on the CTAF, and people wouldn't wedge what airport they're landing at in their call outs to an uncontrolled airport. And so you'd hear 9 people all at your airport, and then eventually they would start saying what airports they're on. Oh, they're 80 miles away from me. They're somewhere completely different.
Oh, yeah.
But nobody had any idea.
So now your training, and Patrick taught me, and I did the accelerated program. Mm-hmm. But Patrick, you did a different. You did the 141, right?
I did. I did 141. It was a full 4-year college degree, and it had its ups and downs. But really, the big part was I took that first step and paid my first tuition bill before ever logging an hour of dual received. I kind of jumped into the deep end of the pool to learn how to swim.
Yeah.
I always tell him it's remedial flying. I did it in a year. But it'd take you 4. I mean, I don't know why you're so slow. I have no idea. But the fact is, there are some benefits to both sides. You just have to figure out where you're at. And his level of knowledge when he got here, he's just so good at this stuff. Now, your childhood is different than a lot of what we encounter. You mentioned childhood. Let's talk about what part of where are you from again?
All right. Well, long story short is basically Germany. My dad's German, and I lived there for a while, but I went to China, lived in China for several years, went back to Europe, lived in Scotland for several years. That's where I learned to speak English, and then moved here. Moved to Vermont. Yeah. And
English is your second language. Third language.
Technically, yeah. I was speaking Chinese more than I was speaking English at the time. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Listen, you've never lived until you get ready to make a landing in an airplane, and all of a sudden in your headset you hear do-do-do-do. So we bring in, right? We bring in some Top Gun music, right? I'm theming out. I'm ready to go. And the next thing I know, he's playing some Manchurian dance track. I don't even know what none of them saying. I can't land a plane when I don't know what's being said. Yes, we had to have that talk. Yeah.
It was Manchurian. It was Mongolian.
Oh, that's a difference.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't know the difference. Yeah, there's definitely a difference.
Yeah.
So growing up in Vermont or in all these other areas too, where did the love or the desire to go into aviation happen? Because most people that I know, we grew up here in Arizona where it's a little more common to know people.
To know people who fly.
For you?
I have, to this day, not a single person in my family who's a pilot.
Yeah.
I don't know aside from the friends and the colleagues that I made along the way, I have no family or friends who are pilots. Everyone from before my college years, any friend that I had from before then, not a pilot, not a single one of them. And so my dad's a physicist. He got his master's degree in microfluidics. And so that kind of instilled in me the love of physics, and the controls came pretty intuitively to me, albeit on video games. Sure. But that was more or less the extent. Exactly. That was more or less the extent of my aviation experience. Never did a discovery flight. I mean, I'd been on small island hoppers, but otherwise the aviation industry really was painted as a pretty ick pathway, where my folks both told me stories about how, well, pilots, they don't get paid well, their hours are terrible, they always get divorced, all paid a really negative image. But eventually I started to do some research, tried to seek out people who are actually in the industry and ask them, well, is any of this true? And yeah, it was in Germany in the 80s. But it's not Germany, it's not the 80s anymore. And the industry has completely changed.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was...
It is so funny that you said that, because we have a lot of prospective students coming into the flight school, and when I talk to their parents, oftentimes their dads are like, hey, so why is it different when well, back then we had more pilots than we had jobs, so therefore the wage was going down.
Yeah.
Now we have a big old opposite and some holes. You know, we have way more jobs than we have people to fill them. Thus, it's a great industry to be in. Now, you guys are interesting sitting between you two, and one of you is a 141 grad. One of you is an accelerated pilot program grad.
Yep.
One of you flies for an airline. One of you did an airline, and now you do corporate flying. The total difference in when these two started their training time, 2 years. So you trained in what years?
2019. That's
What
when I
year
started.
did you train?
2017 I started, yeah.
See the difference? It's 2 years. But the great thing that you could take home from that is there's a lot of pathways inside the industry. So you may want to do something different, and these guys are doing both ends of it. So it's really, really cool. And they got there in different ways, but you can get there. This is doable.
Absolutely.
It's a chance for you to be a part of something that's really, really cool. And everyone in the community. And so let me ask you that too. As you, and both of you guys, as you've noticed, you go a little further, you're into corporate and you're into the airlines. Does everybody, it seems like the airline community is very tight knit and everyone's trying to help everyone. Do y'all notice that when you get to the next level?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Through every step of training, I had probably 15 or 20 instructors just at my airline. And of those 15 to 20 instructors, I had one guy that I didn't really mesh with. Otherwise, every single one of them, I have the personal phone numbers of like half of those guys. Because, and not because I asked them, hey, can I text you and bug you with this? But because they reached out to me and said, hey, I know you're done training with me, but I hope you do really great in that next part. And that was a totally above and beyond thing that I was not expecting out of, frankly, a major corporation, a big, massive company. Even there, you get that personal touch.
We're sitting with Patrick Melman, who was my CFI, worked at Venture West Flight School, and made his way to SkyWest, where he works today, which is very cool. And I'm obviously sitting next to John, who is a corporate pilot, who is just crushing life. And then I'm emasculated, but it's okay. It's okay. I'm going to get through this somehow. Now, let me ask you another question. Both of you guys, what was some of your biggest challenges in flight school? Because yours was the elongated version and yours was the real accelerated version. Tell me some of the challenges y'all ran into. Patrick, you want to start?
Sure. For me, actually, it was very much associated with that 4-year degree. The fatigue really sets in at about 4 weeks in. Once you're 3.5 years into a 4-year program, it starts to slog, and you feel like you're not moving anywhere. I've been doing the exact same thing, semester after semester, year after year, and I'm not going anywhere. And there's a feeling of tires just spinning in the mud. And the same kind of feeling kind of started to set in even at the airline training, where it's 2 months of the hardest studying and training day in and day out ever.
Not 2 whole months.
Exactly. Well, but
that's a long time, bro.
Yeah. To have very few days off, 2 straight months, it was pretty rough. But
I'm gonna tell my boss that. Yeah. I'm gonna tell him exactly what you said. You help me, right? You heard it. Okay.
But near the end of that, you start to get that fatigue of, all right, I've heard this said 3 times, but it hasn't sunk in once.
Yeah.
And you get to the end of it and going, I know this somewhere up here.
Employee of the month right there. You see that, right? That was dope.
I learned it all. I learned it all at some point.
It's somewhere in here.
It's somewhere in there.
That's awesome. Now, how about you? You went through the accelerated programs. How were your challenges different than that?
Yeah, well, I guess I experienced fatigue, but in a different manner of sorts. So A lot of it was when I started. I mean, I knew I wanted to do this.
Sure.
But I then realized how much was being thrown my way that I was expected to learn in a week or two. And especially at the start, it's kind of weird because aviation was, it was so different. And I don't have anyone in my family that flies either. So it was such a different world for me. I didn't know anything about it at all. And so I felt like learning it was very hard. And then I started to question my capabilities. Am I going to be able to do this in such a short amount of time? But yeah, you just decide to keep studying that day and hope that it gets easier, and then
chip away bit
slowly
by
chip
bit.
away. Yeah.
Trust the process. I was told that a couple times.
Yep, and you
Just
really
trust the
don't
process.
expect to. There's so many building blocks that when you learn one thing, it's also helping you understand a concept that you're going to have to learn later on. So it does get a lot easier later on.
That's 100% why the program that Patrick taught me through is broken apart in stages, because you can't eat an elephant. You have to do it one bite at a time.
Yeah.
You can't just jump in and try to put the whole thing
Yeah.
in. So you got to take it in stages like that. And if you know what you're up against, like Patrick would explain to me the day before what we're going to study and what our flight's going to be on, well, I could go home and work on chair flying and rope memorization so I knew what was happening the very next day. And that way when I bombed, at least I practiced for my bombing. Right, Patrick?
Yeah, of course.
Worked out great.
And that first step is always the hardest one. For, when you're starting into aviation, the private pilot, you're going from literally not a pilot to a fully licensed pilot that can fly an airplane by themselves from place to place.
Dude,
that's a big step.
Yeah.
And you got to learn a whole new language when you start talking
Exactly.
about comms. It's like working at the Waffle House. You got to learn a whole new language.
First time I took my mother flying, she's like, I recognize all the words you're saying. I know that they're English, but I have no idea what you're saying. Yeah, it's English, but not English.
And at first, it's such a distraction when you're in the plane, and then it becomes. After you get used to it, you really like having it, and then you find yourself listening to ATC live on your phone while you're driving along. Back to I don't get a lot of dates. We'll do that on the next show.
Well, we'll keep praying for you, bud.
You're gonna need to. You're gonna need to. Now, what? Let me ask y'all a question. What does a day look like? Because y'all have two different types of days, right? A day in your industry is going to be a little different than a day in your industry.
Yep.
So let's let our guests tell us first, and then I will come back to you and talk about what it's like. So how does your day go? I mean, I know you're kind of just getting in, but tell me how your day goes.
So far, I already have my schedule out through the end of next month. And so I always know what I'm going to be doing. I don't necessarily know where I'm going to be going. That's part of the joy of being on reserve. But as far as reserve goes, I know that, all right, Monday through Friday, I'm going to be, well, actually, it wouldn't even be that long. It would be Monday through Thursday. I know I'm going to be sitting in LA and hoping for a phone call.
Yep.
Then at the end of Thursday, I'm going to go home.
So you're just like a Kardashian. That's cool.
Yeah, more or less.
Exactly like one, right? Waiting for a phone call, and then we'll go home.
Yeah.
That's like something.
Eventually, I'll be a line holder, in which case I'll actually know 2 months in advance every single place I'm going to go, what time, who my crew's going to be, everything. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it's the first time where I don't have just a Monday to Friday. These are my work days. It's kind of a hodgepodge of random days, but it's never more than 4, and then I get a couple days off. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now he gets a cool uniform with that job. Do you get a cool uniform?
I get a good polo that I enjoy. Yeah.
So no, okay. I mean, all you had to do is say no. I mean, that's cool. You didn't get a cool uniform, okay. I mean, Darth Vader got a helmet.
The
Not
epaulets,
everybody
that's for sure. Yeah.
He doesn't get the hat.
Oh, you don't get the hat, bro.
No hat.
That's terrible.
No hat.
Okay, so how, other than that, those deficiencies in your life, how else is your day different than what he would expect?
Well, mine's different because mine truly is just up to the boss, whatever the owner wants to do. So we'll either have a schedule out 3 months in advance or a month in advance, or we're scheduled 5 months out in advance, but they're changing this month, so, and I'm technically on call a lot unless I've let them know that I'll be out of town and things. So it's a little different, but generally I'm not doing multiple legs in a day. It's generally just to a destination, and then we stay there for a few days until they want to go home. And
they pay for your hotel or for wherever you stay and everything?
Yeah, whenever you're out of base, you get per diem, and that's the same at the airlines as well. Yeah. So, you get a per diem, and then you get a hotel and stuff. And so, you get to sightsee a little bit, and thankfully my boss has good taste in destinations. So I've gotten to see some pretty cool spots and do international trips, which is very cool, which is something at the airlines. International flying isn't something really that you do until you're at a major airline or later on. So so I feel particularly blessed that I get to travel kind of internationally a little bit.
So how many days a month do you work?
It varies so much. I mean, sometimes it's 20 days a month, and then sometimes it's
5 or 6.
Yeah, 5 or 6. Yeah.
And then you.
Pretty consistently between 12 and 16.
Okay, so when you talk about positives about being a pilot, that's a big deal. Now, let me ask y'all something crazy, and I'm going to back up because it's going to be a minute for you. It's not going to be too long for you. Okay. Where I'm at, and when I talk to students about the next steps in getting through the program and what they're going to do with their interviews, I want to come to you in a minute, but you just did an interview. Tell me how I know you were prepared for it because I was working with you when you were getting ready, but explain to me how that interview goes, because I think if you're looking for a job to be in the pilot industry, you got to get through that interview.
Absolutely.
How did you sell yourself in that process?
So the first thing that they're going to do is all the paperwork, and that kind of gives you a couple minutes to just see their face and be present next to each other and more or less in silence. You have to be okay with a little bit of awkward silence while they're flipping through pages, while you're holding up logbooks for the camera, whatever. Or if you're in person, turning the logbook around and, again, sitting in silence while they look through all 400 pages of your logbook. They're gonna really dig into your logbook and make sure that you deserve to be there.
So the take-home message, what I'm getting is, both of you guys have written logbooks. Mm-hmm. Maybe y'all should switch to digital. I mean, there's 400 pages. That's a lot.
Yeah, I have a digital one as well. But the problem is, through all of my training, I had a physical logbook, and so every single signature from every single instructor, stage check ride, everything, I would have to go back and get.
You'll always
get them
still
again.
have to bring that to exams
Exactly.
or to interviews, even if you're on a digital.
So I'm asking you, if you are a new pilot, you have to have both. You're telling me for redundancy. Is that what you're telling me? You need a written and a digital, or can you get by with just the digital?
A lot of folks in my class in the training program at SkyWest had 100% digital.
Okay,
and they used it from day one, had digital. And
That's
all
a
they
nugget.
did was print them out.
That's an Aviator Edge nugget. You don't get that anywhere else. That's fact. I mean, so you're telling me that I can do both, because I was hesitant, because I knew that having the written, because that written log is worth, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. That's your life written down there. You can't lose that. You can't leave that in an airport in Singapore. That ain't going to work. You got to know where it's at all times, right? So that's kind of cool. And then how does your interview, was it long? Was it real long?
About 2 hours and 45 minutes. Yeah.
That's a long time, man. That's a long time.
Yeah. Pit stands down about here.
Yeah, that's like
and they're asking you questions, IFR related questions, and then also questions about your life and things like that, right?
Yeah. Funny enough, I expected the kind of tell me about yourself things to be up front. We got finished with a logbook, and he immediately said, so what are the 4 parts to an ILS? And I went, oh, okay, instrument check ride. Got it. All right.
Yeah.
And we went straight into it. Straight into it. There were questions from all levels of instrument. Typically, as a GA pilot, you're not doing a lot of SIDS and stars. Sure. But in the airline industry, we're only ever doing SIDS and stars. There's always a departure. There's always an arrival to be flown. And so they don't really bother asking too many questions about the instrument approach plates or anything like that, because they assume you know that.
Right.
But with the SIDS and stars, all right, you have this, but climb via or descend via, accept, maintain, things like that. And they'll give you all sorts of, just like any check ride in GA, it's a lot of scenarios. Here's the scenario. Here's what could happen. Here's what does happen. What are you going to do?
So, John, tell me about the interview process for what you're doing. That has to be different, right?
Yeah, a little bit different. I mean, the job that I got was through word of mouth, and so it was a little trickier because it was through just the owner that had heard about me and had a good recommendation. So I just met up with them and a few other people that were in the company, a couple of higher ups in the company, and we just sat for 2 hours and had lunch, and it was really kind of a get to know you. I mean, these people had nothing to do with aviation, so I didn't experience any of these type of ILS questions, things like that. They knew that I was at SkyWest Airlines at the time, and that I was going to Allegiant Airlines in a month or two. And so, they just, it was more of a get to know you to see if I would be somebody that they would want to rub shoulders with constantly. Cause we're whenever I work, I'm hanging out with them.
So 2 different pathways, both went through a regional like SkyWest. Mm-hmm. So both of you have that on your resume that's very similar. So that pathway clearly is available. And I think the take-home message in all of that I heard was that in this business, we've said it before, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's how you're getting a job. And I tell every student that walks through this door, the first people you're interviewing with is your first person is us, obviously, because we want you, we want to determine if you fit our culture. But the second thing you've got to do is you and that CFI. That CFI is your first open door into an airline. This is my CFI. I expect one day to be sweeping a Southwest plane. It won't be too terribly long. He's seen me fly, so I don't want to jump the boogie or nothing. You see what I'm saying? Safety first. But yeah, that is a way to do it, a pathway that you can get there. That dream can be realized. Y'all done it.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the nose. You are being evaluated constantly. Everyone you interact with will tell somebody somewhere, oh, did you meet such and such? They were such and such. And they tell you that in training that, you from day one of in-doc training, every instructor that you interact with, every sim session, everything, even though it's only really technically being evaluated so that they can keep track on your progress, every interaction you have with those instructors, they take notes on how you interacted with them because they want to know, they want to keep their finger to the pulse of their pilots and see, who likes working with whom and who doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's vital. Because you work in your world, you always have a second pilot with you, right?
Yep.
But in your case, you don't never know who that second pilot's going to be, and it's kind of always a changing crew. Whereas in your world, you working with Carl or Todd, every time you show up, that dude or lady is there as part of your world. So you have to have a relationship with some depth when you work in the corporate versus your relationship needs to be, let's get through this next 3 or 4 hours together. That's kind of a different relationship and a different dichotomy, I think.
Yep.
If I get told to be a chameleon one more time by an instructor, that's what they tell us. You have to be a chameleon. You got to be able to change colors for whomever you're flying with.
Bro, and I tell these students the same thing in this, and I see if y'all would agree. What I tell them is when they hop in that cockpit, the person next to them, especially if they're senior, which they will be when you start, they're sizing you up. They know everything about you, and they're going to tell someone else in your organization. So a bad day that's not what we do in this business. What they really want is emotionally centered people in the airline business. We don't want your highs to get too high and your lows to get too low. You got to stay in the middle somewhere. Like you said, you got to be a chameleon.
Yeah. And there is a certain level of, everyone you're going to work with, senior or not senior, is a working professional. They're not going to, their job isn't to sit there and judge you.
Yeah. But
at the same time, they are going to kind of keep note in their mind, like, that was a fun person to fly with. They did their job well, and then out of sterile, above 10,000 feet, they were kind of fun to talk to. And they'll remember that.
Yeah, the way I also tell students is, it's not, people don't remember what you say. They just don't. They remember how you made them feel. Yeah. And if that's an uncomfortable emotion attached to your name, it's going to be told to a bunch of people in any state, in anything you do in life. So it's really, especially in this business, because you're so close to one another. In your daily work, you're only a few feet apart. So there's a lot to that. And you're depending on each other for what could be life-saving skills in your training. So it's good to know what you're up against. Is there anything that you ran across, either one of you, coming out of both different styles of training, that you ran across and that really took you for a loop? You were like, ooh, that was harder, like that was real hard, or because is there anything that pops in your head? It may not be.
Not immediately, honestly. The training I got was pretty, more or less, really prepared me for what I had to do.
Yeah.
I think, if you have
it's
one,
all
go for it.
as challenging as it can be each day. I felt like I was pushed every day of training, and you never feel fully prepared going into the check ride, but yeah, you just hope that you've crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's in order to make it work, and it so far has. So it's great.
Yeah, something that actually surprised me was how hard the training was when you compare it to the actual evaluation. And they would word it this way almost every time. We're going to train you up here and evaluate you down here. They make it harder so that when you go, if I make you do a power off 180 landing, whatever, then on your check ride, when you may or may not have to do one of those, it's in your back pocket. You have that card in your deck. You're ready to go.
Yeah.
And if you only need to use a couple of those cards, awesome. You're more prepared.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me. You're 100%. That's the way you trained me, and that's the way the program that we worked with. So, explain to me this: is there one misconception that either one of y'all can think of that you're like, we need to clear this up right here? This is the difference. This is the thing. This is why I fly corporate. This is why I fly airlines. Do you have anything that you can think of?
Yeah, actually.
Okay,
One thing that I came across in flying with or training with my airline was one failure and you're out. That's what I had heard through all of my training.
Right.
One failure and you're out.
Sure.
And that was so not the case. One of the guys who I was my sim partner had 3 check ride failures.
Okay.
He still got hired. He's doing his IOE, I think, actually today.
So you're telling me that there is a pathway if you've stumbled on one of those tests
Absolutely.
or you've stumbled on a check
Absolutely.
ride and maybe it's kind of painted to you that there's no coming back. It's on there. It's permanent. You
It
don't
is.
want to do it, but if
Absolutely.
you unfortunately fall into that hole, you can come back from
It is
it.
absolutely
And
survivable.
are you particularly talking about throughout your training at SkyWest on those interviews? And
Both.
stuff?
I'm
Yeah.
talking about in your actual GA
Yeah.
training, a check ride failure or 2,
Yep.
and failing an observation or failing something like that in actual airline training. A couple of guys, I know someone who failed the KV, the knowledge validation, and who failed the LOE, the line-oriented evaluation. Those are basically the oral and the flight portion of your final check ride to get the airline transport pilot license. And both of those guys individually failed each of those parts, and they're still flying.
But they brushed them up on them. They
did.
studied them longer. Now,
Exactly.
when you get to the airline, my understanding is they've already sunk a lot of money in you. So what they want to do is make sure it's not pass or fail. It's pass or we're going to teach you until
Yes.
you pass.
Yeah.
Is that right?
To a certain extent,
To a
yeah.
certain extent,
Well, I
they,
mean,
they want to see that there's a desire in you,
Yes.
yeah,
Okay. Exactly.
and a capability, which obviously, hopefully, they've already established at the interview process. But yeah.
Exactly. And so if there's a trend that they're seeing that they just don't think that they can remedy, sure, they'll cut that. But if it's one little bit of deficiency or it's I needed an ad session in maneuvers training and I needed 2 ad sessions in loft.
Yeah.
Look at me now.
okay.
Yeah.
I made it.
Yeah.
But dude, we want you to save as we can be. I would rather
Exactly.
you not limp in. I would
Exactly.
rather you fly in.
Yeah.
Let's know what's going on.
Well, and they're also the teacher at the airline. So when their students are failing, essentially their pilots, they need to learn as well how they can better make their training more capable for
Exactly.
everybody to learn, because everybody's learning at different paces and things.
Exactly.
I totally agree. All right, so let me ask one more question that's going to be odd. And what do you see? And this is a weird question. I mean, what do you see as how the evolution of the airline industry as we look into the future? And I realize you don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to hold you to any of this. But how do you see it? I mean, you guys are in it every day. You're in 2 different facets of it. How's that play out?
That's actually the not having a crystal ball is great. I was going to start with that. I can't see the future,
right.
But the training and hiring goes up and down, every single day. And in training, they actually told us if you don't like the aviation industry right now, check again in 10 minutes.
Give it a few minutes.
Give it a few minutes. It'll be different tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right.
But at least for my airline, and this is the case with a lot of regional airlines, is they're not going anywhere. And
Right.
they're not getting smaller. I mean, my airline just bought a whole bunch of ERJ 175s from Mesa Airlines. They bought
Now, what's an ERJ 175?
I don't know,
An
some plane or
Embraer
something.
It's a
Yeah.
plane. It's a plane.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. That's what I was asking. I mean, because you may not know that. That's some
Yeah.
insider jargon, but that's a specific
Yeah,
model of plane.
it's an Embraer wing-mounted
And you like
regional
flying
jet.
those, don't you?
Oh yeah,
You
that's
enjoy
why I
those.
got my type rating.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I know he
Yeah,
loves those.
gorgeous plane. Yeah.
Yeah, great plane, auto throttles and everything. That's awesome.
We don't have those in the Pipers I fly much. No, we need to though.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, I'll requisition.
I'll be
that.
your auto throttles.
Oh, thank you. That's very good. Yeah, the last thing he ever wants to hear from me again is your controls. When you do
So-
flight training, your controls, my controls, positive exchange of who's controlling the airplane. And oftentimes I will say to him, anytime, we hit a good piece of turbulence or something, I'll just look at him with your controls. And he knows how to bail me out.
And you know what's funny? Now that I'm a first officer, I have the same job. Anytime,
Really?
Yep. Anytime if the captain is flying and something goes wrong, like an engine failure, fire, or separation, they're gonna control it up to about 1,000 feet or whatever the safe engine out procedure altitude is, and then go, all right, this is an unanticipated threat, and the aircraft is under controls. You got controls. Okay, because now the captain's gonna pull out the QRH and just start running checklists. Right. So I still get told your controls. All right, okay.
Nice. Hey, I didn't see you there, bud. That's interesting. Okay, so what about you? Future. Tell me how this industry is evolving. What's going on next?
Well, I see a massive need. Yeah,
Okay.
which is why this whole thing is
Sure.
trying to get people to commit to something that they've always wanted to do and who are slightly afraid that automation or things is going to limit the amount of jobs available. And there's no way that that's going to happen anytime soon.
Not immediately. I totally agree with that. You are not going to get me, from Poughkeepsie, New York, or Schenectady to feel good about a plane that's completely. There's not any pilots up there, man. I got to know that if you got a hold of a bad tuna sandwich, I got to know the next person's the next man up. That's it. It's like football, next man up. I don't want to know you. I don't want to know somebody on the ground's trying to figure it out. That's not okay with me.
Yeah.
That's not okay with me.
From a passenger perspective, that's one thing, and even from a pilot perspective, I wasn't necessarily totally convinced that we weren't going to be replaced by automation until I went through that training. Oh my word!
Yeah,
There is so much automation in the airplane I fly, and I still have my work cut out for me on a 2-hour flight.
Yeah. I mean, we think at times we can teach computers to do anything, but dude, I had Facebook. You can't teach computers to do much. I've proven that with Facebook. All right. So one final thought. How do y'all manage your? Because y'all are in different places. His work-life balance through school was a mess, and then your work-life balance through the accelerator program, it had to be a mess because it was just really work, no real life balance. So how, now that you've just got into this, are you finding that your life's changed and your work-life balance has either improved or taken a turn?
Well, just like they train you up here and evaluate you down here, the same thing, bigger picture, the training is the hardest thing. Once you're done with the training, now you have more days off. Now you have, when you are at work, engines aren't exploding every day. Sure. And you have it's just a little easier day in and day out. And that, not even to get into how many days off you have now. in training, in all of May, I think I had 3 days off and then 1 travel day. That was 4. So basically a week, my weekend was a day. And otherwise, it was just go, simulator every single day, training every single day, studying when I wasn't in the simulator. And those simulator sessions aren't just, all right, my 1.5 hour dual received. This was a 6-hour event, 2 hours of pre-brief, 2 hours of being in the left seat, 2 hours of being in the right seat, an hour of debrief. And so it would go beyond 6 hours sometimes.
Dang.
Now,
that's a lot.
Nothing like that.
That is a lot. Because, I bet with all the money they're paying, you complain if it's not new $100 bills, too. Ain't it? I know how it is when you rich people. I know how it is with you pilots. All right, so explain to me the same question I just asked him. Tell me.
Well, I think a lot of it too is people thinking about salary, how much they get paid, and all that. And what I've learned too is that quality of life is also
huge.
Yeah, and
enormous.
It's going to be weighed differently as a priority for money, but it seems to weigh a little bit more on my preference of what I need in life.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something to weigh out. Is my schedule's a little more fluid, it's changing a lot, and your schedule is, especially when you're a line holder, you have a lot more visibility further out, and it doesn't change much. And and so I don't know, that's something to look forward to, is what type of quality of life you want as well.
Definitely. And with a regional airline, because we have contracts with all the major airlines, I have flight benefits with all the major airlines.
So you get to fly
anywhere.
Yeah,
dude,
and everything. Yeah.
If you need someone to put on your list, I'm always here for you. And speaking of things that take care of our needs, I need a cheeseburger. We should go home now, shouldn't we?
We should, yeah.
Patrick, it was fun hanging out with you, man.
Likewise.
And I told them, you know why I told them? I told them the reason I don't like flying with you anymore. Every time you and I went up, my engine would fail. I'd have a simulated fire. You can't just fly and enjoy time with a CFI. They want to break the plane and expect you to get it out of whatever mess. Yesterday, I'm up here flying with him, and he's talking about, okay, let's talk about these unusual attitudes. Now the plane's doing all kind of stuff, and he's like, open your eyes. Y'all got to stop training. Can't we just fly somewhere and enjoy it? I bet driving to the mall with y'all in a car is rough. It wears you out, doesn't it? You got to train somebody on something all the time. That's why y'all are.
Patrick, thanks for joining us today, and
Absolutely.
Good luck at SkyWest.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being here.